hi, it's your old buddy Zoo, and this is the RG Vita Pro. And I've honestly been trying to figure out how to start this video for the past couple days now. Because here's the thing, I kind of like this device. I've been picking it up and taking it with me the last couple days, and that's usually a good sign for if I like a device. But I also think Anbernic made some extremely strange decisions with the RG Vita and the RG Vita Pro. And I think you need to know about that before you plunk down 150 of your hard-earned dollars. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the RG Vita Pro. We're going to talk about what makes it cool. We're going to talk about some things that make it rough. And we're going to talk about where it sits in a market that has become weirdly competitive at this $150-ish price point. So let's get right to it. I want to start by talking about Anbernic because I don't think you can review this device honestly without some context. Anbernic used to be one of the easiest recommendations in this entire hobby, full stop. The XX line, starting with the RG35XX, then you had the SP, you had the 34XX, you had all sorts of stuff. They were near perfect devices. They were budget friendly, they were built around original hardware form factors that people actually loved. They shipped with decent stock operating systems out of the box, and there was and still is a plethora of excellent custom firmware available. And oh, by the way, they have a chipset capable enough to handle everything up to PlayStation 1 and some N64 without complaint. They were impulse buys. They were the kind of thing where someone asks, what should I get to play old games? And you would say, just get one of the XX things without hesitation. You move on with your life. And then something shifted. You had the RG Slide. You had that new rotating screen device. These are weird products. They're not necessarily bad, they're just weird. Like, who asked for a sliding handheld? Because I'm not sure. It's the kind of thing where you watch the reveal and you think, okay, I see what you're going for, but is this really what your audience needs right now? Is it what your audience wants right now? There have been some bright spots like the RG477M or the 477V, which are legitimately great devices, and I will go to bat for these as ultimate 4x3 machines. But the overall pattern of Anbernic's releases over the last year or so has been a drift away from the thing that they were actually really, really good at. And then they announced the RG Vita and the Vita Pro. And the concept was, we're going to make a device inspired by the PlayStation Vita. And on paper, I get it. The Vita had one of the best form factors ever put in a handheld. People love it, there's real nostalgia, great, let's do it. Except here's problem one. PlayStation Vita emulation in 2026, it's just not there. Not on the base RG Vita, not on the Pro here, not reliably on pretty much of anything. Vita 3K exists, there are some games that are playable, but it's still very much a work in progress. So you've named both of your new devices after a console you cannot actually emulate. That is a marketing decision that's going to confuse people, and it's going to disappoint them. And here's problem two. The base RG Vita uses a T618 chip. That's the same chip, by the way, Anbernic has been shipping in devices since what, 2022? And I think that chip in a different shell could have been a really, really good product. Specifically, they should have made a one-to-one PSP clone. The PSP form factor is beloved. PSP emulation on the T618 is genuinely good. And if Anbernic had put that chip into a shell that actually looked like a PSP and they priced it at like $99, I think that sells really well. People will get what it is immediately. The nostalgia is earned. It starts to percolate. No one's confused about what they're buying. They say, I want to get a PSP. $100 ain't that bad. It's a win-win-win-win-win-win-win situation for everyone involved. Instead, they put the T618 in a PS Vita clone that can't run PS Vita games. And they called it the RG Vita, which is confusing because then they released a more powerful RG Vita Pro. And now you have two devices and an identity crisis. You're confusing the customers when the smarter play would have been to launch the T618 device as a PSP clone and then save the Vita branding exclusively for the Pro. And then you'd have a Vita Pro launched alone with a better chip, and it would be a dedicated PS Vita tribute device. That's a stronger product. I think it's a better idea. I think it's a better sales pitch. But instead, they just diluted everything. And I'm not saying this to pile on Anbernic. I own more of their devices than I care to think about, and I still think they make some of the best budget hardware in the hobby. I'm just saying it because the RG Vita Pro deserves an honest review, and you can't really give it one without acknowledging the weird strategic decisions surrounding it. Now let's talk about the device itself. The RG Vita Pro is a 5.5-inch Android and Linux handheld in a PS Vita inspired form factor. It's available in black and white. It costs $149.99 at retail. Under the hood, you got the Rockchip RK3576. It comes with 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of internal storage. It's expandable via micro SD. It's actually got 2 micro SD slots, which is a nice touch. It has Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, USB-C with DisplayPort output, so you can plug it into a monitor or TV or XR glasses. And it has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery with 18 watt charging. Oh, and it supports USB-C to C, which is not always standard with Anbernic. The screen is a 5.5-inch IPS in-cell touchscreen. It comes in at 1920 by 1080, 1080p. This is a legitimately nice screen for the price, even if it might live in a basement and make angry posts about women on 4chan. It's sharp, it's bright, and it's not that bad for a non-OLED option. This device dual boots into Android 14 and 64-bit Linux. And here's a detail I kind of wanted to flag because it boots to Linux by default. Android is the secondary operating system. You hold the Anbernic button during power on and you get into Android. That's a choice. Anbernic made a conscious call to make Linux the focus. And I think that tells you something about where they think the value is on this device. Let's talk about build quality and overall design. And we're going to start with the good things because there's genuinely good things here. It looks incredible. The PS Vita silhouette just does something to you. Like your hands, they know where to go. These rounded edges here means that you don't really have to have one specific grip. You can just kind of move your hands on the fly. There's a reason they designed the original one like this. I'm not a huge fan of the glossy glass fronts, but this one's not that bad. The plastic has a slightly matte finish. The shoulder buttons, they sit in a nice spot. They're clicky. We're going to get to that later. God, they're clicky, but they sit in a nice spot. The overall fit and finish of this handheld is pretty good. It's designed by someone who loves handheld gaming. It's designed by someone who loved the Vita, and they wanted to make a handheld an homage to the Vita that also looked and felt great. This 1080p screen backs up everything completely, side by side against basically any other Anbernic device. The difference is immediate. Pixel art looks clean. 3D games look sharp. Text is legible because there's not any over-sharpening like you saw in the standard RG Vita, which I'm glad they fixed it, but shouldn't have been there in the first place. The screen gets very bright. It also gets extremely, extremely dim. Like you can barely even see that. It's very good in a wide variety of situations. The face buttons on here are fine. They have good travel. They're not very clicky. They're not too proud. They don't jut out that much. Can you see that? They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing amazing about them. They're just fine. And then your Hall effect joysticks also are pretty good. They have good travel. They have good tension. They're responsive. Not any complaints there. Now let's get to the triggers. There are no analog triggers on the RG Vita Pro. These are digital, clicky buttons. They are loud, they are clicky, and that's all they are in 2026 in a device with the word Pro in the name. The RG52 Mini, which costs significantly less than the Pro, it has Hall effect triggers. The Mangmi Air X, it has analog triggers. The Retroid Pocket 5 has analog triggers. It's just a real questionable decision, especially on a device that's called the Pro. Now, if you're playing a bunch of older games, it's probably not the end of the world, but if you play racing games, if you play anything that benefits from variable input, it's a real limitation, and it's actually disappointing, like I said, on something called the Pro. The D-pad here is a membrane-style D-pad rather than the dome D-pad on the original Vita. It's not a deal breaker, but it is different than what you'd expect if you were looking for a one-to-one clone of the Vita. But it is a quality Anbernic D-pad. I have no real complaints about it. It's solid. They're pretty good at making D-pads. There's no rear touch pads on this like the original Vita, but there are divots for your fingers, which I guess it's just kind of where your middle finger rests. I don't know. They're there. All that being said, build quality overall is really solid. There's no flex. There's no squeaks. There's nothing stupid or embarrassing. It's a well-made device. The trigger situation is a design choice I disagree with, but at least it's not a build quality issue. Those are different things, but by God, it's so loud, like I'm doing a drum solo. Hey. All right, let's talk about performance, because this has an RK3576. This is a meaningful generational step up from the RK3566, which Anbernic has been putting in devices for years. If you own an RG353, an RG Arc, any of those devices, you'll feel the difference immediately. The RK3576 has better performance cores, and it uses them. Let's start with the easy stuff: Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, PlayStation 1, even N64. I played some Cruis'n USA on here, some Golden Sun. Everything looks great on this device. Everything plays perfectly. And none of this is a useful test in 2026. Everything at this tier of emulation runs on everything, so let's move up. PSP on the RG Vita Pro is really, really good. You got God of War running on here, very clean. Pretty much every game you're throwing at it is going to run very, very well at 2x, sometimes 3x resolution. Now, games like God of War here, they're not easy PSP games, yet they run the way they're supposed to. Whoops. If PSP is your primary interest, this device handles it like a champ, and the form factor makes it feel appropriate in the way that, like, maybe a clamshell wouldn't. Let's break this dang door down. Yeah. Nintendo DS on here is weirdly comfortable and easy to use as long as you're okay with the screens being side by side. I found myself playing Princess Peach here for much longer than I needed to just to capture some B-roll, and it was because I was having fun. That's actually one of the most meaningful endorsements I can give for a device. Kind of the same situation with Dreamcast here. The RK3576 handles the main Dreamcast library very, very well, and I found myself just playing Crazy Taxi for a prolonged amount of time while trying to capture some footage. It's a pretty solid Dreamcast machine, just take it as that. Now let's talk about PlayStation 2 and GameCube, because here's where it gets kind of interesting. The Vita Pro should be able to run a fair amount of PlayStation 2 and a fair amount of GameCube, and that's a meaningful step up from the base RG Vita, and especially from the older RK3566 chips. Now, GameCube on here works pretty well. It's not as dialed in as it would be on, say, a Retroid Pocket 5 with months of community optimization behind it, but the baseline, it's there. And I think the ceiling on this chip with mature custom firmware is going to be higher than what you're going to get at launch, obviously. PlayStation 2 on here is weird, though. Like, Resident Evil 4, just base settings, it should work. But it doesn't. I'm running at like 91% speed, but it's never really smooth. It's never really what you would expect it to be. It's weird because it should work. It's just that this chip, it's not super optimized yet. And hopefully, I think ideally, it'll get fixed on the Linux side of this versus the Android side. And then because this is the RG Vita Pro, we should probably talk about Vita emulation. And this is kind of a weird one because games that are compatible with Vita 3K are going to run fine. They'll run upscale. This is Persona 4 running at 2x resolution. I played Persona 4 Gold and I played Dragon's Crown, and they were great, but these games always run well. If you're buying the RG Vita Pro specifically to play Vita games, you're going to be disappointed because the name is marketing. This hardware is genuinely capable of a lot of things, but PS Vita is not one of them yet. That said, Anbernic did include Vita 3K on here and some Vita ROMs out of the box, which is either optimistic or I guess cynical, depending on how you want to read it. I will say this, I do appreciate that they tried, especially since they named it the RG Vita, and hopefully the situation gets better as the emulator itself matures. Just don't buy this device today expecting Vita to be a solved problem, because it's not. It's not. All right, let's talk about software. I saved this section for after performance because I think the software situation is probably one of the most important things about the handheld, and I wanted you to understand the hardware first. So, as I mentioned, the device boots to Linux by default. If you want to hold the Anbernic button during startup, you get Android. 2 separate operating systems on one device. And it's not a new idea. They've been doing this all the way back to like the 353 line. But the idea, again, is that Linux is your emulation-focused environment, and Android might be for apps, for streaming, and for certain emulators that run better on Android than they do on Linux, like like Vita 3K. It is an interesting approach. Stock Android on the Vita Pro is just standard Anbernic Android build. There's every emulator under the sun, questionable default settings, minimal curation. The included game collection is organized by numbers rather than anything useful. You're going to want to clean it up, but it's normal for Anbernic. Some of that persists into the stock Linux build, including the numbered ROMs. And the stock Linux build on here, it's rough. Like, it's serviceable. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world on the XX devices. It kind of looks like the firmware from the XX devices. But this is a $150 device. I don't want firmware on something priced like this. But here's the cool thing, and this is genuinely new behavior from Anbernic, which is why I kind of want to acknowledge it. They seeded ROCKNIX and Nuli and Gamma OS developers with units before the device launched. Regardless of which one you pick, any of those custom firmwares is probably going to be cleaner, faster, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be better than stock Anbernic. And the gap between stock and custom firmware on this device, I think, is larger than almost anything else Anbernic has shipped. It's primarily a function of the custom firmware getting a lot better. But the ceiling is real. The ceiling between stock and custom, it's there. You're just going to have to do a little bit of work to get to that better performance and that better experience with custom firmware. I'm not going to make this video drag down and show you how to install every custom firmware under the sun. I might do that in the future. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. But the good news is that as custom firmware matures on the RK3576 over the next 3, maybe 6 months, I think the device is going to keep getting better. All right, up next, I want to spend a minute or two putting the RG Vita Pro in context against 2 other devices roughly in this price range, because I think that conversation matters if you're making a buying decision on this being like one of your main, if not the only purchase of the year. Up first is the Retroid Pocket 5. This is going at retail right now for $199, and you can get it for $175 and sometimes closer to $150 either used or on AliExpress if you got coupons. The RP5 handles GameCube and Wii and PlayStation 2 comfortably. It has a mature software ecosystem with years of community optimization behind it, and it doesn't require a weekend of tinkering to get into a good state. You either turn it on and play it with the Android mode, or you flash ROCKNIX on here. Either way, it is much more capable, it's much more reliable than the RG Vita Pro. And at that $199 price point, it's kind of in a weird middle ground, because if it was more expensive, I'd point you towards the RP6, which gives you a newer chip and a better screen for just a little bit more. But if you can find the RP5 for closer to this $150 price point, especially on AliExpress with coupons or used in our Discord marketplace, this is going to be probably your best bet. It's still one of the best deals in handheld gaming. And you're not really getting a trade-off because it's similar form factor. You're not giving up dual boot because you can put ROCKNIX on here. If what you want is a device that's just going to work, it's going to play GameCube, it's going to play PS2, honestly, the RP5 is the safer choice. And it comes in this cool GameCube form factor. If you want to go cheaper, then you got the Mangmi Air X, which is $99 direct from mangmi.com. This runs a Snapdragon 662, and PSP and below is really its sweet spot. And in that price range, it genuinely delivers. The screen is good, it has analog triggers, and the price is $99. But if your library consists mostly of like Game Boy Advance, PlayStation 1, DS, PSP, then the Mangmi Air X handles all of that, and it's in your pocket for $50 cheaper. That's a completely legitimate purchasing decision. If you want to save $50 and lose some questionable GameCube and PlayStation 2, go ahead. Now, where you might pause is if you put faith in ROCKNIX and Nuli and Gamma OS and all those guys to maybe squeeze out a lot more performance under the hood on here. You can expand your PlayStation 2 and your GameCube territory. You have a 1080p screen. You have dual boot flexibility. If that matters to you, maybe spend the extra $50. Although, for $50 more than this, got the RP5, which, honestly, it's better in every conceivable way. Take that, people who think I'm an Anbernic shill. So what's the verdict on the RG Vita Pro? Well, it's one of the most interesting devices that Anbernic has made in a while. It has a great screen. It has a capable chip. It has a dual boot setup. It has day one custom firmware support, which is new for Anbernic. And it has a very nice form factor that makes you want to pick it up. If Anbernic had launched this device by itself without that base RG Vita muddying the branding, I think the story around it would be significantly better. Although that being said, it has digital triggers where there should be analog ones. It has a stock software experience both on Android and Linux that isn't really finished. And it has a name it can't really earn yet because you can't play a ton of Vita on here. Those are real limitations, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But here's my zoo take. If you buy this device today and you flash ROCKNIX or Gamma OS on day one, you're probably going to have a good time. If you buy this device today and you expect it to work great out of the box, you're going to have a frustrating day or two. I think this device is going to be better in 6 months than it is right now, and only you know if that's exciting or annoying. I'm keeping mine, and that's my answer. I'm probably going to get rid of the regular Vita though. But the screen on the Vita Pro here, it's too nice to give up. The form factor, I like it too much, and I want to see where custom firmware takes the chip. And again, let me know in the comments if you want me to test out all of the latest and the greatest custom firmware options for this. If you're not a tinkerer, it might not be for you. But if you are a tinkerer, if you are a form factor stan, or a person that's been waiting for Anbernic to do something genuinely interesting, this might be a device for you. Well, Gary, the clock on the wall says it's time for What Did We Learn? And we learned that the RG Vita Pro is a device that got here along a strange road. Anbernic had a pretty clear lane, budget devices with beloved form factors priced right, and they've been drifting from it for a while. The RG Vita Pro is them finding something interesting again, even if the strategy around it doesn't really make sense. If you're willing to wait it out, it might be great, but then again, it might not be, which is all the more reason why you should like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that jazz. Stay tuned to see if this gets better. Links for the RG Vita Pro, the Retroid Pocket 5, and the Mangmi Air X are going to be in the description. Let me know in the comments if this video helped you figure out which one of these devices is right for you. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye. Introducing the RH Pocket Titan, where retro gaming, modern tech, and pure madness collide.
Consumer complaints poured in almost immediately. Reports indicated the devices were riddled with fatal software bugs and used substandard materials.
Okay, well, I couldn't even get the Pocket Titan delivered to me. They shipped it in a box of oranges.
This was supposed to be the one. No, they had to ship out this piece of shit. And I don't even know what to do with it anymore.
We interrupt this program to give you an update on the Pocket Titan handheld controversy.
Following a nationwide manhunt, the duo behind the controversy, known as Stubborn Pixel and Zoofariz, were apprehended and are now serving prison sentences. Authorities have found the dump site of thousands of broken Pocket Titan gaming handhelds. They were found at the same location where Atari buried their unsold Atari 2600 cartridges. The company's patents and remaining inventory were acquired by a new buyer, electrician Timothy Thompson, Esquire III, who has overseen a complete overhaul to launch a flagship product, the Pocket Titan 2.
It's got plenty of memory and storage, and it can even 3D print. Yes, 3D print more memory in case you run out of it.
Pocket Titan 2 is my ultimate doodad thingy. There's nothing it won't do. No, really, it literally does everything.
Where is that terrible noise coming from? Matt Davis, you are too young to play that violent game. Pee pee poo poo, change this game to be more kid-friendly.
We now return you back to your regularly scheduled program.
What in the hell was that?